You're listening to Real Conversations, where every week we take a peek at the favorite movies of fascinating people. Real Conversations is hosted by Brian Coley, the founder of Art Within and Real. Today, Brian sits down with Janna Brown. Janna is a transformational speaker, boss cultivator, and streamlined success strategist. Janna helps women increase their self-worth, find their voice, and elevate their inner boss. You can find Janna at jannab.com.
So, Janna, thanks for being in the Real Studios today.
It's a pleasure, Brian.
Glad to have you. Every person we have as a guest on the show, we just jump right into their top 10. So why don't you tell folks what's on your top 10?
It's funny. I have an interesting mix, to say the least.
Yes, you do. Yes.
I have Pitch Perfect, X-Men, Davdas, Kingsman, Hunger Games. I have Coming to America, Lord of the Rings, The Matrix, Up, and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
I would say that's pretty good diversity there. A really good diversity. So tell me about, is it Davdas or Devdas? How do
Davdas.
Davdas. Okay, tell me about that film, because that's something I'm not familiar with.
Well, Davdas is, okay, first of all, there's a funny story behind it. So my sister-in-law got me hooked on Indian movies. She had a whole thing where we made samosas, dressed up in, we made a day of it. And I never saw an Indian movie before. I didn't realize, one, they're 3 hour long, and they have intermission in between.
Oh, really?
But this was the first movie that we saw. And they have the dancing, and the culture is just beautiful with the costume. Davdas in particular is about this young lady who was a servant at his house, and he was coming home, and she was in love with him, and she had this candle that she lit when he left, because they were best friends as little kids.
Oh, okay.
And she never let the candle, the flame, because it represented her love for him, go out no matter what. Huh. And then when he came back, the mother didn't want necessarily them to be together because of the fact that it was, India has a big class society. Mm-hmm. So she winds up leaving, I think, and marrying somebody else, and he became an alcoholic, and then wound up meeting this woman who worked at a brothel.
Oh, wow.
Who fell in love with him as well. So you have these two different type of women who were in love with Davdas, and it was this crazy triangle. And it's been so long since I've seen it, and I don't remember what happened to him at the end, but it was my first introduction to Indian movies, and I was hooked ever since.
Really? So what about the story kind of moved you?
I think more so just the culture. Like, the costumes were amazing, and the fact that with a lot of Indian movies, you really see touching, you really see like hugs and kisses, and just the language is extremely poetic, very romantic. Okay. And all you have to go off is the language, and true indeed is in subtitles, so you're constantly like trying to keep up reading wise. But I think it was just the drama and the romance of it, and I'm a dancer, die hard, so I love to dance. So just being able to see a different dance style and just the beautiful costumes that go along with it, and the music, it was really awesome.
That's good. Well, you see so many different cultures in your top 10, represented from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon to just different kinds of places that you're taking us, from the Matrix to Lord of the Rings to X-Men. There's a bunch of mutants, it's really, in Coming to America, obviously he's experiencing a different culture. So all these are kind of mixing in different culture. Kingsman. But one thing that I noticed in your top 10, and maybe I'm going to hear a really great story, I'm hoping I'm going to hear a really nice story about this, is when you talked about the Indian film, you were talking about that forbidden love kind of aspect to things.
Yes.
And I was noticing that, especially in your top 10 with regard to like these noble men's daughters, or these people who are children of nobles who come and have to figure out, who they really love. You see that with Eddie Murphy in Coming to America, where he's this noble prince, and yet he's trying to he has this forbidden love, let's say, with this other person, who the noblemen don't want him to fall in love with. You have that with Crouching Tiger and Hidden Dragon. She's a nobleman's daughter,
I didn't notice that. That's funny.
Yeah. So I'm
even
wondering.
Even in Up, if you think about it, like the two families were totally different between Carl and his wife. Yeah,
that is true. So tell me, do you have any story for me? About why would this be in your top 10?
You mean just the theme?
Well, yeah. I guess in your life, did you ever? Are you a daughter of a nobleman, or are you have you had to deal with forbidden love or anything like that?
Well, not necessarily forbidden love, but it's funny you say that because my uncle is Maynard Jackson.
Hello.
Who's the first African American mayor,
yeah.
of Atlanta, and so John Wesley Dobbs was my great grandfather.
Oh, wow.
So Auburn Avenue, he coined the name. So in that sense, every time I go to the airport, that's named after my family. So there's a rich culture and heritage here.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So when I moved down here, he was already mayor, and that was kind of surreal because I didn't necessarily grow up in that.
Yeah.
And I learned because to me, he was just...
So it was like coming to America almost, right?
In a sense, right?
Coming to the South.
Coming to the South, right? And I remember at our graduation when... I think this is when it somewhat really hit me because he was mayor at the time. He was really busy, so we didn't see him a lot as far as family gatherings when he could. But I remember he was backstage, and I have a twin brother, and they called my twin brother and I off the stage during graduation to come because he wanted to tell us congratulations. He couldn't stay, but he wanted to make there and let us know. And it's just funny because I was like, who else does that? And I learned so much about him, unfortunately, at the funeral itself, and I saw the love for him through the city. When the Civic Center, that holds 5,000 something people, and it was it was jam packed, and people were lined on the streets. You would have thought a president had passed because they had him at Morehouse College, they had him and all these different places, and just how even afterwards the impact his life has had on so many people. And then when I think about my husband and I, we come from two total different backgrounds. That's my best friend. We've been married almost 15 years in June and together for 21. We met on MARTA. Funny, that's a story in and of itself. But he's from Atlanta. He grew up in Oakland City, so he grew up in a different way than I grew up. So in that sense, yes, it's two different type of cultures coming together. And it's funny because he remembers my uncle, and he was like, wow, I would love to meet him one day. He he never thought he'd be marrying into the family in a sense. But maybe I guess that was a subconscious thing because I didn't recognize that until you said that. They were just all good movies to me.
Well, this is usually what happens with our top 10 stuff as we look into them because, God has obviously picked these for you, right? And you picked them because they moved you. And we believe that he moved you in order to do that. So it's somehow part of your story. And
it's interesting because when I think about who I am as an individual and how I am with people, even with religion, my family is extremely diverse. And I'm talking about immediate family, from Buddhist to Muslim to Christian to, spiritual. So I have to almost be... I can't even find the words, but the best example of God's love. In the sense that, he loves no matter who his child is. And being in a place where I can be flexible, being in a place where I can be understanding of other people and what they believe in their cultures. So even from a family religion perspective to what I do in a sense of my profession as an entrepreneur, I have to be an understanding person as I coach people. I have to be able to understand there's different cultures. People grew up differently, but that doesn't mean that we don't have the same foundation or the same, baseline. So I'll be tripping about this later tonight.
Well, it really is pretty representative in your top 10. I mean, you think of all these groups that are coming together from Pitch Perfect, with all these girls who are vastly different coming together. X-Men, you have these mutants who are kind of on the fringes coming together. Lord of the Rings, they're creating a fellowship, and they're different kinds of people, right? Yeah. So just a lot of different people coming together. And it seems like there's some sort of theme of people who are kind of the unsuspecting, hero. In other words, they're either girls or they're children or they're small people like Frodo or
the unlikely one.
Yeah, they're not likely at all. And some of them, like with the Matrix, the character Keanu Reeves plays is a computer hacker at the beginning, right? I mean, he's the unsuspecting hero that's kind of dragged into a bigger call. Same thing with Frodo. He's kind of the hobbit who's dragged into the bigger call, and Katniss, who is just nothing, and she's kind of dragged into this bigger call. So tell me a little bit about that for you. These unsuspecting genius, skilled difference makers. I call them There was some sort of phrase that I noticed in one of your trailers. It was called Destined Warriors.
Wow.
Was the name of it. And I was wondering how that hit you as a person. Crouching Tiger, I think Hidden Dragon was the Destined Warrior is how they described it. So tell me about that. How does that hit you as far as seeing all these Destined Warriors, from Neo to Frodo to Katniss to all these characters? What do you think?
It's interesting, and you're going to definitely have me thinking more about myself when I go home today. But as I sit here, I think about that part, and I also think about how there was one who could unify them all at the same time.
Yeah.
Without even realizing, that's how amazing our God is that He will reveal yourself to you when you don't even realize who you are sometimes.
Yeah.
And what it shows to me, especially as these past 2 years, really since 2013 when I got over my fear and stepped out to start my own business, is that it's the least likely He always calls.
That's right.
It's the misfits. It's the ones that you don't expect.
That's right.
It's the ones who don't realize the true greatness.
Yeah.
And I was there for quite a while in my own sense, in my own space of really understanding my gifts and really understanding what I'm called to do. And I questioned even my capability within my own family. Like, God, why would you call me to this? I mean, those are big shoes.
Right, yeah.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
My uncle had like size
Literally
13 feet, right? So who am I to then be a part of this? And within the last few years, I started to realize, who am I not? You know, that God has called all of us for something great. But it's only when you accept that greatness. And all of them, and I remember preaching a message on this one time, is it was called Answer the Calling.
Yeah.
How a lot of times God will call those. When you think about Moses, when you think about,
right.
you know, Jeremiah, I formed you before you even. They all had an excuse. They all had a reason why not to.
And everything, yeah.
Right, but He always said, "No, I've got the right one."
Yeah.
And for me, it was always like, "Well, why me, God? Like I battled with low self-esteem and just different things because of my past and stuff that I had been through." And I see this in all of them. How they didn't think they were the one.
Right.
Think about Neo. They didn't think that they had the capability.
Yeah.
But their calling and their destiny was greater than they even imagined or thought.
That's right.
And there were so many other people, destinies resting on theirs as well.
That's good.
That's good. So when I think about me and what the vision that God has given me for my life and what I'm called to do and how great is going to be, there are times even to this day fear would try to rise up and battle me on that. I have to be, you know, not to say I win every day or win every battle, but I'm a lot further than where I used to be. So being able to look and say, okay, God, yes, I am the right one because you've already equipped me. You've already called me. You created this for me before I was even a thought. You put the right parents together. You put the right situation together. You put everything. You are the master planner if there ever was one.
Right.
So nothing happens by circumstance.
Yeah.
So you allow this trait from that trait in this instance and that instance and that experience, good or bad, to happen so that I can then help others do the same.
That's good.
So it's funny because now I'm like, I am Neo.
Yeah.
I'm Frodo. I am all of them because.
Well, let's talk about which one that you resonate with most. So you've got the Kingsman, the guy who's chosen there, right? He's like a tech genius, just like Neo is. Who, he's kind of a street kid who comes out. You got Neo. You've got Katniss. You've got the gal in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, who's kind of hidden as far as her skill set and everything. Even with Pitch Perfect, you have a girl who is extremely skilled, who's coming into this clan or sorority of girls who's a little bit misunderstood and not quite clicking, and then she becomes that difference maker. And Frodo and everything. Which one would you say, if you were to pick one of these characters, which one would you say is where you are now? And maybe which one is the one where you were before?
Okay, that's hard, Brian. So give
sorry.
me a second to think. I would say now, and it's been a while for some of these that I've seen the actual movie, but as far as now, I would say Katniss. And the reason why is that she had humble beginnings. The way she's probably where I am and where I was as well. Just really didn't know if she could do this, didn't realize what was before her. And when I think about where she is now, and how she was able to unify so many, and so many believed in her, and so many people supported her, so many people had what we love to say had her back. And she saw that, and the more she saw that, the more she was encouraged to continue, regardless of the